Right, so when you're working with questions where you're comparing fractions, decimals and percentages, they are almost always going to be on a non-calculator paper. And the best advice I can give you is to keep thinking in terms of hundreds, pence and pounds. So you'll see very quickly that these are very similar every time. This first one, we need to write a quarter as a decimal. Well, the way to write a quarter as a decimal is to think to yourself, how many times does 4, the bottom number, go into 100? 4 goes into 100 25 times, so as a decimal it's going to be 0.25. Right, 27% as a decimal. The way you would do that is if you think of writing 27 pence, but in pounds. 27 pence, if you were writing it in pounds, would be £0.27. And then the last thing that you have to do is to put 3 figures in order. Ascending order means starting with the smallest. And now that you have them all as decimals, 0.23, 0.25, 0.27, it's easy to make the comparison. So in order, starting with the smallest, this would be 0.23, followed by 0.25, and finally 0.27. But what you really need to do is to write them in the same form you were given them. So 0.23 we were given in exact that form. 0.25 we would write as a quarter, and 0.27 as 27%. Same here, 1/5 is a decimal. How many times does 5 go into 100? 20, so it's 0.20, there's your 20. 24% as a decimal, you'd write 24 pence in pounds, would be no pence, no pounds, and 24 pence. In ascending order then, 0.18 is the smallest, then you go 0.20, which is a fifth, then you've got 0.24, which is 24%. 3/4 is a decimal. Well, ask yourself, what's 1/4? What do you get? How many times does 4 go into 100? It goes in 0.25 times. Well, 3/4 will be 3 lots of 0.25, which is 0.75. 76% is a decimal. Pence in pounds. And now you can see a comparison. That's the smallest, 0.72, then 0.75, then 0.76. So 0.72, 0.75 is 3/4, and 0.76 is 76%. Right, 78% is a decimal, no pounds, 78 pence. 3/4 is a decimal, 1/4, 0.25, 2/4, 0.50, 3/4, 0.75. There's the third figure that you're putting in order. It's ascending again, so it's starting with the smallest. Then this time we're going to go 0.75, which is 3/4, and finally 0.78, which is 78%. Right, 70% as a decimal, 70 pence in pounds would be no pounds, 70 pence. 3/4, we know now is 0.75, and the missing one is 0.73. In ascending order, so the smallest now is 0.70, which is 70%, then 0.73, then 0.75, which is 3/4. This time they're asking us to write them in terms of percentages. So 0.3 would be writing pounds in pence now. That would be 30%, doing the opposite to what we've done previously. 1/4 as a percentage, well, 1/4 is 0.25, 0.25 is 25%. So in our comparison now, you can see that that's going to be our smallest, which is a quarter, followed by 28%, followed by 30%, which is 0.3. Now, when you're writing decimals as fractions, you need to remember the sort of hundred, tens and units idea that you would have first met in primary school. Hundreds, tens and units move leftwards out from the decimal point. So you would have, there's your decimal point, there's your unit, there's your 10, there's your 100. So 306 would be 306. The same thing applies to the right of your decimal point, but here it starts off with tenths, then it goes on to a hundredths, then a thousandth, and so on, going that way, just like the next one there would be 1,000 and so on. So 0.07 would be no units, no tenths, and 7 hundredths. So there, as a fraction, you would write it as 7 over 100. With this question, it's a bit trickier because they're not asking you in the way they did with the previous questions to turn them both into percentages, both into fractions or whatever, or decimals. So we're given that choice there. Probably the easiest thing to do would be to write them in decimals. They're given 0.65, 3/5, 1/5. How many times does 5 go into 100? 20. So 3 lots of 20 would be 60. So that's going to be 0.60. And 70 out of 100. Well, 70 out of 100 would be 70%. 70% would be 0.70. So those would be what we've got in decimal form. We want this now in descending order. So don't assume that the question is always going to ask you to go from smallest to largest. Make sure you read the question carefully. The largest number here is 0.70. So we're going to start off with 70 hundredths. Then the next largest is 0.65. And the smallest is 0.60, which is 3/5. Okay, last few questions are to do predominantly with fractions. We're interested in which of these is exactly the same as a third. Now, what you need to do is look at the two numbers that make up the top and bottom of your fraction. And if they can both be divided by the same figure, then that means that you can write it as a smaller fraction. So you can see here that 2 can be divided by 2 and 6 can be divided by 2 as well. And if you divide 2 by 2, you get 1. And if you divide 6 by 2, you get 3. So that fraction is exactly the same as a third. So that's one of our fractions. 2 and 9, you can't divide both of those numbers by a common number, so that can't be cancelled down further and is clearly not a third. With this fraction, I can divide both of those numbers by 2, or I can divide them both by 6. 6 is the bigger one, so that would be the better one to use. If I divide the top by 6, I get 1. If I divide the bottom by 6, I get 2. So 6/12 is the same as a half, which isn't a third, so that isn't 1. 4 and 15, can't divide those by the same thing. 5 and 15, I can divide them both by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, 15 divided by 5 is 3. So again, that is the same as the fraction I'm looking for. So the 2 there that are equivalent to a third are 2 over 6 and 5 over 15. Same idea with this one. Is there anything that I can divide both of those by? The answer is yes, I can divide them both by 5. If I divide 5 by 5, I get 1. If I divide 25 by 5, I get a fifth. That's the fraction we're looking for, so that's one of my answers. 3 and 10, nothing goes into 3 and 10 together. 4 and 15, again, nothing goes into 4 and 15 together. 2 and 10, yes, I can divide the top and the bottom by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. That's what I'm looking for. So that's also an equivalent fraction. And 5 and 15, I can divide both by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. So although I can cancel it down, it doesn't give me the same fraction as the one I'm looking for. So the only two to put circles around are those. Okay, 75% of the following figure. Most of you are quite comfortable that 75% is the same as 3/4. So I can see here that I can divide this quite easily into quarters. 2 of these triangles form a quarter, so that would be 25%. Now I've shaded in a half. 3/4 would be shading in a further 2, so there would be my 3/4. May look a bit weird because it's not vertical and horizontal, but you can always turn the page if that helps you. Okay, so finally now, what percentage of the following shape is shaded? You may find it easier to work with fractions first of all. Count the number of shaded blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 out of, what have we got there? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 20 blocks in total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 10 out of the 20 are shaded. 10 out of 20 is half. Half as a percentage, you should know without too much problem that that is 50%.